The sharp sound of metal scraping against rubber filled the air, followed by a loud bang. My heart stopped. Tires hissed and deflated, smoke rising from the pavement like steam from a boiling pot. I slammed the brakes, my body jerking forward against the seatbelt, my little daughter screaming in the back seat. I looked down and saw them, rows of steel spikes glittering under the sunlight, hidden in the shadows of my own driveway. And standing at the corner, with her arms crossed, her mouth twisted into a smug smile, was Karen, the self-appointed queen of our homeowners association. Her face looked like satisfaction itself, as if she had just won. "You people need to learn a lesson," she shouted, her voice dripping with venom. Her words cut deeper than the spikes ever could. My daughter's frightened eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. She didn't understand what Karen meant, but I did. It wasn't just about HOA rules or petty arguments about lawn height. It was about us, the color of our skin, the way we didn't fit in with the perfect image Karen thought this neighborhood should look like. My chest burned with anger and fear. I swung open the car door and stepped out, my voice shaking but strong. "Are you insane? My child is in this car." Karen's smirk didn't fade. In fact, she laughed, a cold, sharp laugh that sent chills crawling up my spine. The neighbors began peeking from their windows, whispering, watching like it was a show instead of a crime scene. I dialed 911 with trembling hands. For a moment, Karen's confident expression faltered, but then she squared her shoulders, as if she believed the law was always on her side. But this time she was wrong. The sound of sirens began to echo in the distance, growing louder, closer. My daughter sobbed softly, clutching her stuffed bear, and I felt the rage boiling inside me. My mind was torn between comforting her and confronting the woman who had just endangered our lives. As the police car screeched to a stop and 2 officers jumped out, Karen raised her chin proudly, already rehearsing the lies she would spin. But none of us, not even her, were ready for what happened next. The story didn't begin here. It started weeks before, with the first cold stares, the nasty notes slipped under our door, the whispered complaints about how we brought down the value of the neighborhood. When we first moved in, my daughter had skipped across the front yard barefoot, laughing, her curls bouncing in the wind. She loved the new house, the big oak tree that shaded the porch, and the park nearby where kids rode their bikes freely. I wanted so badly to believe we had finally found peace. But Karen made sure we knew we didn't belong. It started small. A knock on the door one morning. I opened it to find her standing stiffly, clipboard in hand, lips pursed so tightly they almost disappeared. "Your trash cans," she said flatly. "They were out 10 minutes after collection. That's a violation." I blinked, surprised. 10 minutes. Rules are rules. Her eyes scanned me up and down in a way that wasn't about trash cans. It was about something deeper, uglier. I apologized and moved the cans immediately. But it didn't end there. Next week, it was the height of my grass. Then the color of the curtains in my daughter's room. She claimed they were too bright and ruined the uniform look of the street. Each time, her voice dripped with false politeness, but her eyes burned with something crueler. The worst was the letter, slipped under our door in the middle of the night, typed in bold letters. "Families like yours don't belong here. Move out before you make more trouble for yourselves." I remember holding that paper in my hands, my body shaking. My daughter had picked it up first, thinking it was from a friend at school. She tried to read it aloud before I snatched it away. My heart ached knowing she had seen those words, knowing she had felt their poison before I could shield her. I wanted to report it, but fear held me back. What if nobody believed me? What if the police sided with her, as they often did in stories I'd read and heard from friends? So I stayed quiet, until the day she crossed a line no one could ignore. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind where kids played in sprinklers and neighbors grilled on their back decks. I had just picked up my daughter from school, her backpack bouncing on her shoulders as she skipped to the car. She told me about the drawing she made of our house and the big oak tree, our new forever home. We laughed together as we pulled into the driveway, music humming softly through the speakers. Then bang, the sound of my tires exploding as the car lurched violently. My daughter screamed. My heart dropped. I looked down at the glitter of sharp steel under my wheels. And there she was, Karen, her arms folded, her smirk wide. "I told you people don't belong here," she hissed. The rage in my chest was like fire, but beneath it was something sharper fear. What if my daughter had been hurt? What if she had stepped out of the car first, barefoot, running across the driveway? Sirens were still ringing in the distance. Neighbors were gathering. My daughter was sobbing. My fists were clenched. And then, blue lights flashed across Karen's face. The police had arrived. Karen turned to them with false confidence, already spinning her lies. But this time the truth would not stay hidden. And in just a few minutes, she would feel the cold steel of handcuffs around her wrists. The red and blue lights splashed across Karen's smug face, painting her in sharp colors that made her look almost unreal. She didn't even flinch as the officers approached. Instead, she lifted her chin like she was welcoming old friends. "Officers," she called out, her voice dripping with fake relief. "Thank goodness you're here. I was just about to call you myself. These people," she jabbed a finger at me, "were driving recklessly. I had to take precautions." Her words struck me like ice. Reckless. Precautions? My daughter's quiet sobs echoed inside the car. My jaw tightened, and I stepped forward, my voice rising above the murmurs of the neighbors who had gathered to watch. "She put spikes in my driveway," I shouted, pointing to the twisted metal under my tires. "My little girl could have been killed." The officers glanced down at the shattered rubber and the jagged strips gleaming on the pavement. Their eyes met. Then one bent down, pulling on a pair of gloves to pick up the evidence. Karen didn't miss a beat. "Don't believe their story. They've been causing trouble ever since they moved in. Breaking HOA rules, lowering property values. I warned them. Everyone here knows I've been trying to keep this neighborhood safe." Her words were smooth, practiced, as if she had rehearsed them in front of a mirror. My stomach churned. I had seen this play out before. Stories on the news, friends' experiences, times when the loudest, most confident voice drowned out the truth. For a moment, fear gripped me. What if they believed her? What if justice slipped away again, right here, in front of my daughter's frightened eyes? I looked at the officers, my heart pounding. "Check my car. Check the cameras. I know some of these houses have doorbell cameras. Someone saw what she did." Behind the curtains, neighbors shifted. Some looked down, too afraid to speak. Others whispered among themselves. But one voice rose above the silence. I saw her. The crowd turned. It was Mrs. Alvarez, the elderly woman from 2 houses down. Her gray hair glowed under the porch light as she stepped forward, her voice trembling but steady. "I was watering my plants when she dragged that thing into their driveway. I told her it was dangerous, but she wouldn't listen." Karen's smile cracked for the first time. She spun toward Mrs. Alvarez, her eyes blazing. "Liar! You're just siding with them because..." But she stopped herself, the ugly word caught in her throat. The officer holding the spike strip lifted it higher, for everyone to see. "Ma'am," he said firmly to Karen, "you're under arrest for reckless endangerment and property damage." The words felt like thunder rolling through the neighborhood. Gasps spread through the crowd. My daughter peeked out from the car window, her tear-streaked face wide with confusion and relief. Karen's face turned red, her voice shrill. "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. I make the rules here." But the officer was already pulling her hands behind her back. The click of the handcuffs sharp and final. For the first time since we moved into the neighborhood, I felt the weight of justice tilt, even if just slightly, in our favor. Karen screamed, struggling, but the officers held firm. Neighbors whispered louder now, some nodding in agreement, others pretending they hadn't seen a thing. I bent down to comfort my daughter, brushing her curls back from her face. "It's okay, baby. You're safe now." She hugged me tightly, her small arms trembling around my neck. "Mommy, why did she hate us?" The question pierced me deeper than any spike ever could. How could I explain the ugliness of hate to a child who only wanted to draw pictures of oak trees and play with her dolls? My throat tightened, and for a moment, I had no words. But before I could answer, Karen shrieked again, her voice echoing through the night. "You'll regret this. All of you. This isn't over. The officer pushed her gently toward the squad car, but her eyes locked on mine, filled with a dangerous promise. And as the car door slammed shut behind her, I couldn't shake the feeling that she meant every word. Because sometimes, even when justice comes, hate doesn't end. It waits. It festers. It finds new ways to strike. And in the days that followed, I would learn just how far Karen, and the people who silently agreed with her, were willing to go. The night air felt heavier after Karen was shoved into the back of the police car. The flashing lights finally faded as the cruiser pulled away, leaving the neighborhood cloaked in silence. Neighbors quickly scattered back into their homes, curtains falling shut like stage curtains after a show. I stood in the driveway staring at the jagged remnants of my ruined tires. My daughter clung to my leg, exhausted but unwilling to let go. A lump swelled in my throat. Yes, Karen had been arrested, but the way she screamed, the way her eyes burned with fury, it didn't feel like the end. It felt like the beginning of something worse. "Let's get you to bed," I whispered, scooping her up. Her small body rested against me, her breathing finally slowing. Inside, the house felt both safe and fragile, like one wrong move could shatter the peace. That night, as I tucked her under her blanket, she whispered, "Mommy, will she come back?" I brushed a kiss on her forehead, forcing a steady voice. "No one can hurt you here. I promise." But deep down, the promise felt too thin, too fragile. Sleep didn't come easy. Every sound outside, the rustle of leaves, the squeak of a car door, made my heart jump. My mind kept circling back to Karen's words, "This isn't over." The next morning, sunlight filled the kitchen, but the weight in my chest didn't lift. I brewed coffee, trying to shake the unease. My phone buzzed with notifications, HOA emails, group messages from neighbors, and one in particular that made my stomach turn. Karen was treated unfairly. She was only trying to protect the neighborhood. "This family is trouble. They should leave." It was the HOA group chat, and though a few people defended us, the louder voices were the ones painting us as villains. I dropped the phone on the counter, my hands trembling. Even with Karen in custody, her influence spread like a stain. She had planted seeds of hate, and now they were growing. Later that day, I drove my daughter to school in my husband's car. She squeezed my hand before getting out, still nervous. I smiled for her sake, but my mind was already racing. What if someone tried to intimidate us while Karen was gone? What if her friends in the HOA turned on us even harder? By afternoon, whispers started circulating. Karen's lawyer had managed to post bail. She was coming back. The thought sent a chill through me. I pictured her standing on her porch again, glaring at us like nothing had happened. My daughter would see her. My neighbors would watch in silence. The cycle would repeat. That evening, I decided to take action. I began gathering everything I could. Photos of the spike strips, texts she'd sent, even my neighbors' testimonies. Mrs. Alvarez stopped by with a warm smile and a shaky hand holding out a USB stick. "I have video from my security camera," she whispered. "It shows everything." I nearly cried with gratitude. "Thank you. This could make all the difference." But as I closed the door behind her, headlights suddenly flared across my living room wall. My pulse quickened. I peeked through the blinds. Karen's SUV. My breath caught. She was back. And not just back. She was standing in my driveway, her arms crossed, her face twisted with rage, her voice loud enough for the whole block to hear. "You think you've won," she shouted. "This is my neighborhood, and I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of people you really are." My daughter rushed into the living room, eyes wide with fear. I pulled her close, heart pounding, because at that moment, I realized Karen wasn't just angry, she was dangerous. And this time, she wasn't alone. 3 other HOA board members stood behind her, their faces hard, their eyes cold. The fight wasn't over. It was only beginning. The sight of Karen standing in my driveway again made my stomach twist into knots. She shouldn't have been here. She should have been lying low after spending a night in handcuffs. But instead, she looked bolder, angrier, and more dangerous than before. Behind her stood 3 HOA board members, Mr. Grant with his pressed khakis and stiff jaw, Mrs. Winters clutching her clipboard like a weapon, and tall, stone-faced Mr. Lee. Their presence wasn't casual. They were here to send a message. Karen wasn't alone. My daughter clung to my waist, trembling. "Mommy, why are they here again?" I swallowed hard, trying to hide the fear in my voice. "Go upstairs, sweetheart. Lock your door." She hesitated, eyes darting to Karen's sharp glare, then ran off. I stood alone at the window, my heart hammering as Karen raised her voice, so the whole neighborhood could hear. "This family doesn't belong here," she shouted, her words cutting through the quiet evening air. "They don't follow the rules. They put us all in danger. And if the police won't deal with them properly, then the HOA will." My fists clenched. My mind screamed to storm outside, to shout back, but I forced myself to stay calm. That was what Karen wanted: anger, chaos, a scene she could twist to her advantage. Instead, I opened the door slowly and stepped onto the porch, my voice steady but firm. "Karen, you've already crossed the line. You put my child in danger. You were arrested. Go home before you make things worse." Her eyes narrowed, her lips curving into a smirk. "Worse? Oh, honey, this is just the beginning. You think the police care about you? About your kind? They'll believe me before they ever believe you." The board members shifted, some looking uncomfortable, but none of them spoke up. My chest burned with fury. It wasn't just Karen. It was the silence of those who stood beside her, letting her spew venom unchecked. I pointed to the street, my voice rising. "Leave. Now." Karen's smirk widened. She leaned closer, her whisper sharp enough to cut. "Make me." At that moment, the slam of a car door echoed down the block. I turned to see Mrs. Alvarez striding toward us, her phone in her hand, her expression blazing with courage. "I'm recording this," she declared. Her voice shook, but it carried. "I've got proof of what you did last time, and I'll get proof of this too." Karen's face paled for a split second before twisting into rage. "Mind your business, old woman," she snapped. But Mrs. Alvarez didn't back down. She stood tall, camera aimed directly at Karen. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope, like maybe we weren't as alone as Karen wanted us to believe. Karen hissed under her breath, turning to her board members. "We'll deal with this later," she said. Then louder so everyone could hear. "But mark my words, you haven't seen the last of me." They stalked back to Karen's SUV, the engine roaring to life as they sped away. Silence fell again, but it wasn't peace. It was the heavy silence of a storm gathering strength. Mrs. Alvarez lowered her phone, her hands trembling. "She's not going to stop," she said softly. "I've lived here 20 years. I've seen her drive people out before. But this is worse. She's targeting you because she thinks no one will stand up to her." My throat tightened. "Then we have to stand up. For my daughter. For everyone who's scared of her." Mrs. Alvarez nodded, slipping me the phone. "Tomorrow, we take this to the HOA meeting. If she wants a war, we'll give her one, with the truth." I squeezed the phone in my hand, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. For the first time, I felt a shift inside me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing to fight back. That night, as I tucked my daughter into bed, she whispered, "Are we safe, Mommy?" I smoothed her hair, forcing a smile I didn't fully feel. "We will be," I promised. But deep down, I couldn't shake the image of Karen's eyes, the way they glowed with hate, the way she said it wasn't over. And the next evening, when I walked into that crowded HOA meeting with Mrs. Alvarez at my side, every head turned, every whisper grew louder. Karen was already there, seated at the front table with her board, her chin lifted, her eyes locked on me like a predator waiting for its prey. And I knew this night would change everything. The HOA meeting room was already packed when I walked in. Folding chairs filled every inch of space, the air heavy with whispers and the faint scent of cheap coffee. My palms were damp as I gripped Mrs. Alvarez's arm for support. Every eye seemed to follow me, some sympathetic, others cold, others avoiding me altogether. At the front table sat Karen, wearing a crisp blazer and pearls, like she was running for office. Her board members flanked her, faces stiff and unreadable. Karen's smirk widened when she saw me, her gaze full of challenge. The meeting began with the usual motions: budget updates, landscaping complaints, but the tension was so thick, you could feel it pulsing in the room. Finally, Karen cleared her throat. "There's an important matter of safety we need to discuss," she said sweetly, her voice dripping with false concern. "Certain residents have been engaging in reckless behavior that endangers all of us. As president, it's my duty to protect this community." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I felt my chest tighten. She was about to rewrite the story, twist it until people believed I was the danger. I stood, my voice shaking but loud enough to cut through the noise. "That's not the truth. Everyone here needs to know what really happened." Karen tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Oh, please enlighten us." Mrs. Alvarez rose beside me, holding up her phone. "I have video," she announced, her voice trembling but strong. "It shows Karen placing spike strips in their driveway. It shows everything." Gasps erupted. Karen's mask cracked, her smile faltering. "That's a lie," she snapped. But Mrs. Alvarez had already pressed play. On the screen, grainy footage showed Karen dragging the spikes, glancing around, then laying them neatly across my driveway. The evidence was undeniable. The room erupted into chaos. Some neighbors gasped in horror. Others exchanged guilty looks, as though realizing they had been siding with a lie. A few still muttered under their breath, defending Karen out of habit or fear. I felt tears sting my eyes, not from sadness, but from vindication. For once, the truth was louder than Karen's voice. But Karen wasn't finished. She shot to her feet, her voice rising above the crowd. "This is a smear campaign. They're trying to destroy me because I care about keeping this neighborhood safe." She jabbed her finger at me. "People like her bring down property values. They don't belong here. And if you let her win, you'll all regret it." The room fell silent. Her words hung in the air like poison, and for a moment I saw it. The ugly truth she'd been hiding behind rules and meetings. This wasn't about safety or order. It was about hate. I looked around the room, at the faces of my neighbors, some ashamed, some conflicted, some still clinging to her lies. My voice cracked, but I forced it out. "This isn't about property values. It's about my family's safety. My daughter could have died because of what she did. If you let this continue, what does that say about who we are as a community?" Silence stretched, heavy and uncertain. Then, slowly, one neighbor stood. "She's right," he said. "We've let Karen bully people for too long." Another voice joined. "I saw her screaming in their driveway last night. It's not safe." And then another, and another. One by one, people began speaking out, the tide shifting against Karen. Her face twisted with fury as the room turned. She slammed her hand on the table. "This isn't over. You think you can take this from me?" The meeting descended into shouting, people rising from their chairs, voices clashing. And then, just as the chaos reached its peak, the door burst open. Two uniformed officers stepped inside, their expressions stern. "Karen Walters," one called out, his voice firm. "We have a warrant for your arrest." The room went dead silent. All eyes turned to Karen as she froze, her face pale. And in that still moment, I realized justice was finally catching up to her. But the question that hung in the air was heavier than ever. If Karen was willing to go this far before, what would she do now that she was cornered? For a moment, the room froze. The officer's words rang out like a hammer strike. "Karen Walters, warrant for your arrest." The HOA president, the woman who had strutted through this neighborhood like she owned every brick and blade of grass, was suddenly very small. Her eyes darted wildly around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to defend her. "This is outrageous," she screamed, her voice shrill. "I am the president of this HOA. You can't do this to me." But the officers didn't flinch. One stepped forward, pulling out the warrant. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for reckless endangerment, harassment, and violation of restraining conditions." Gasps rippled through the room. Even those who had supported her shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Karen's face twisted in desperation. She turned to her board members. "Don't just stand there. Say something." But Mr. Grant looked away. Mrs. Winters fiddled nervously with her clipboard, and Mr. Lee crossed his arms, stone-faced. No one rose to her defense. The officers moved to cuff her, and Karen let out a scream that rattled the walls. "You'll regret this. All of you. This neighborhood will rot without me." The cuffs clicked shut. For the second time in days, Karen was marched out in handcuffs. But this time, the entire neighborhood had watched it happen. The room erupted after she was gone. Some neighbors clapped quietly. Others muttered, still loyal but shaken. A woman leaned over to me, whispering, "I never thought I'd see the day." For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the truth had finally broken through. Maybe my daughter and I could breathe easier now. But hope, I would soon learn, was fragile in a place where hate had already sunk its claws deep. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Too quiet. No Karen pacing the sidewalks. No angry notes on our door. My daughter laughed again in the yard, her chalk drawings returning to the driveway as though nothing had happened. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching us. Cars slowed a little too long in front of our house. Neighbors whispered louder than before. On the HOA group chat, anonymous messages began to appear. "She'll be back. They can't keep her locked up forever. You people don't belong here." Each one made my skin crawl. It wasn't just Karen anymore. Her poison had seeped into others, people too cowardly to show their faces. One night, as I was closing the blinds, I noticed something glittering on the grass near my daughter's swing set. My chest tightened. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the yard. There, half hidden in the dirt, were long nails scattered across the ground, deliberately placed, sharp and waiting. I froze, bile rising in my throat. My daughter had been playing there just hours ago. One wrong step, and she could have been badly hurt. My hands shook as I gathered them in a bag, my mind racing. This wasn't over. Someone else had picked up where Karen left off. I ran inside, locking the doors, my pulse pounding in my ears. My daughter peeked around the corner, her eyes wide. "Mommy, why are you scared?" she whispered. I crouched down, forcing my voice calm even as my hands trembled. "Because some people don't want us here, baby. But we're not going anywhere." I hugged her tight, but my mind was already on fire. Karen might have been behind bars, but her shadow was still here. Her allies, emboldened by her venom, were stepping into the fight. And as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized the truth. Karen's arrest wasn't the end. It was the spark. The real fire was only beginning. The bag of nails sat on my kitchen counter like a silent threat. Every time I passed it, my stomach knotted tighter. They weren't just trash. They were a message. Karen may have been locked away, but her spirit lingered like a ghost. Someone wanted me to know, this fight isn't over. The next morning, I made the choice to call the police again. An officer came, clipboard in hand, eyes heavy with the kind of weariness that says he'd seen too much already. He snapped photos, collected the bag, and promised to look into it. But when I asked if they could patrol the neighborhood more often, his answer chilled me. "Ma'am, we'll do what we can. But until someone's caught in the act, it's hard to pin this down." In other words, you're on your own. I didn't tell my daughter everything, but she wasn't blind. She noticed the way I double-checked locks, how I jumped at small noises, how I kept pulling her closer when we walked outside. One afternoon, she asked quietly, "Mommy, are the neighbors mad at us?" The question broke me. My little girl, only 9 years old, already sensing the weight of being unwelcome in a place we were supposed to call home. I knelt down, holding her shoulders, fighting back tears. "No, baby. Some people are mad because they don't understand us. But that doesn't mean we did anything wrong. Do you understand?" She nodded slowly, but the sadness in her eyes told me she understood more than I wished she did. For a few days, things seemed calm. The silence almost tricked me into believing it was over. Then, one night, as I carried groceries inside, I smelled it. Smoke. Panic surged through me. I dropped the bags and ran to the side of the house. A trash can was on fire, flames licking upward, black smoke curling into the sky. "Mommy!" my daughter screamed from the doorway. I grabbed the garden hose, spraying desperately until the fire hissed and shrank. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the nozzle. My throat burned from the smoke, but I didn't stop until every last flame was gone. When the fire department arrived, their questions were sharp, their faces grim. It wasn't an accident. They found accelerant poured inside the can. Someone had set this fire deliberately. And suddenly, every nail, every whisper, every glare from the shadows, they all made sense. This wasn't petty harassment anymore. This was war. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me bolt upright. A branch snapping, a car door slamming, even the wind rattling the window. It all felt like danger pressing in. By morning, exhaustion weighed heavy on me. But I forced myself up. My daughter needed breakfast, needed normalcy. I poured her cereal, pretending not to notice my hands trembling. Then came the knock on the door. 3 sharp raps. Firm. Unfamiliar. I froze. My daughter's spoon clinked against the bowl as she looked at me with wide, frightened eyes. "Stay here," I whispered. I walked slowly to the door, my heart pounding louder with each step. Through the peephole, I saw them. 2 men I didn't recognize, standing stiffly on my porch. One held a folded piece of paper in his hand. Neighbors? Strangers? Enforcers of Karen's silent army? My breath caught. My fingers hovered over the lock. Every instinct screamed at me to leave the door shut. But then the man with the paper lifted it toward the peephole. On it, in bold letters, were the words that made my blood run cold. Notice of eviction. The world tilted beneath me. Eviction. On what grounds? How could they even? Before I could gather my thoughts, the man stepped closer, his voice low, almost taunting. "You've got until the end of the week." The other man smirked, as if enjoying the fear he knew was twisting in my chest. Behind me, my daughter whispered, "Mommy, what do they want?" I swallowed hard, my throat tight, my vision blurring with rage and terror all at once. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was a calculated attempt to erase us, to drive us out. And in that moment, as the men lingered on my porch with their false eviction notice, I realized the truth. Karen's arrest hadn't ended her reign. It had unleashed something even darker, an organized effort to destroy us completely. And I knew the next move I made could decide whether we survived this neighborhood war or lost everything. The eviction notice sat on my kitchen table, its bold black letters like a punch to the gut. My daughter kept glancing at it, then at me, searching my face for answers. "Mommy, are we leaving?" she whispered. I pulled her close, my arms wrapping tight around her small frame. "No, baby. We're not going anywhere. This is our home. And no one is going to scare us out." But even as I said the words, doubt gnawed at me. How much longer could I fight this war? 2 nights later, the answer came. It was just after midnight when I heard it. A metallic scrape, then a low crunch. My blood froze. I crept to the window and peered out. My breath caught in my throat. There they were. Karen, out of jail, standing in my driveway like a ghost risen from the grave. And she wasn't alone. 2 men, bigger, meaner, their faces half hidden in the shadows, stood with her. And at her feet, glinting under the streetlight, were spiked strips. She was laying them across my driveway again, bold as ever, her face twisted with that same sneer I'd seen the night of her arrest. But this time, there was no fear in her eyes, only hatred. Adrenaline surged through me. My daughter was asleep in her room. If I confronted Karen now, what if things turned violent? What if those men followed me inside? I grabbed my phone with trembling hands, dialing 911. My voice shook as I whispered the words. "She's here. She's back. And she's not alone." Minutes felt like hours. Outside, Karen laughed as she planted the spikes, her voice carrying through the night air. "Let's see her try to live here now," she spat. The men with her muttered something, and one of them kicked at my mailbox, denting it with a loud clang. I flinched. Blue lights flashed down the street. Relief and terror crashed over me all at once. Police cruisers roared up, tires screeching. Officers leapt out, shouting commands. Hands in the air. "Drop it now." Karen's smirk faltered. She froze, her hand still clutching the spikes. For a moment I saw it, the realization dawning on her face that this time she had gone too far. The men tried to run. One made it to the fence before being tackled. The other raised his hand slowly, muttering curses under his breath. Karen, though, she didn't move. Instead, She turned toward my window. Her eyes locked on mine, filled with pure venom. She hissed, almost too quiet to hear, "This isn't over." But it was. The officers closed in, yanking the spikes from her hand, snapping cuffs onto her wrists. She shrieked, twisted, kicked, but it was useless. The sound of metal clicking shut echoed like the final nail in a coffin. From the hallway, my daughter's sleepy voice broke the tension. "Mommy, what's happening?" I scooped her up, holding her tight as tears of relief streamed down my face. "It's over, baby. It's finally over." Outside, the neighbors began to gather. Porch lights flicked on. Curious faces peeked out from curtains and doorways. Some whispered, others shook their heads. And for the first time, I didn't feel small or powerless beneath their gaze, because they all saw it. They saw Karen, the queen of cruelty, being shoved into the back of a police car. They saw the proof of what she'd done, the ugliness she had tried to hide behind her fake smiles and HOA rules. One neighbor even crossed the street, placing a hand gently on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "We should have spoken up sooner." Her words cracked something open in me. Not anger this time, but hope. Maybe not everyone here was against us. Maybe, just maybe, kindness could still grow in this place poisoned by hate. The cruisers pulled away, Karen's shouts fading into the night. I stood there barefoot in the grass, my daughter's small arms around my neck, the cool air filling my lungs. For the first time in months, I felt safe. Not because the fight was easy, not because the fear was gone, but because the truth had finally been dragged into the light, and the one who tried to bury us under her cruelty was now the one buried in her own downfall. And as I carried my daughter back inside, past the dented mailbox, past the scarred driveway, I whispered a promise to myself. We weren't leaving. We weren't hiding. This was our home, and no amount of hate would ever change that.